My name is Matt Voss, and I am a graduating senior from the University of Vermont in the Environmental Studies Department. And environmental studies has meant many different things in my degree. It's meant understanding education, communication, justice, and largely many other fields within environmental studies to understand how we can make this transition towards a sustainable future. And even as I'm supposed to graduate in a month or so and be ready for the professional sphere of the environmental world, I still have so many questions that have been left unasked. Questions like, how is it that we've designed a society that doesn't naturally preserve our habitat? How is it that we generally feel like great stewards of the earth, and yet invisibly our ecosystems all around us, from the local stream to the atmosphere, are at odds with how we live? How is it that solutions to this are so difficult and seem so slow in reaction to the urgency of the climate crisis? So we have all these questions, and environmental problems remind us every year of this urgency. As we can see with hurricane season here, with Hurricane Hannah back in 2020, leaving devastation all across the Texas coast, seen here. And these events just create the ups and downs of ecological catastrophe that in the short term focus our attention upon these environmental problems, but then really don't generate any long-term progress without a true environmental movement. And that's the biggest question, is how to generate a collective focus towards these solutions. To tell you a little more about me, as an environmentalist, I was inspired in high school by an environmental science class, learning about the many problems in front of us and just feeling this ultimate sense of responsibility to do something about it. In the mountains of New Mexico, I really saw this nature that needed to be saved in front of me and decided this was my life course. And in my college time here, I've sensed the nervousness in the students around me in terms of how large these problems seem and how it's on us to try and develop solutions for it. And at the end of this, we're really just searching for one thing: clear, consistent, widespread action to address these ecological problems, and ways in which people can create this harmony between economics and global happiness with ecological integrity. So I really feel that my education is important for everybody, and everybody can really pick this up where I am, because I should not need this job. Everybody should have this, and entire communities should feel involved in it. And for me, I know that there's so many Americans that would want to join this cause just based off of my parents. They want to be as green as they can, inspired by their son joining the field, and yet their main solutions that are thrust upon them are to recycle or to buy green products, such as an electric car or solar panels. And yet we have to recognize that these solutions are very consumerist, individual-based. They're largely too expensive for many citizens in this country, and just recycling is not effective. So where do we go from here? And who's handling this? It's largely in the field of environmental communication, which includes education, activism, and general outreach to the broad public through educational events, which largely go through the age of 22, or just general outreach by key environmental influencers. If I were to ask you right now who comes to mind, you might think of Greta Thunberg or Al Gore or someone in the political sphere, or a key sustainability officer from a business, but they only have so much influence as one individual. And they really can't change much, especially as it's largely been the trend to promote what's called the cognitive approach, or cognitive fix, made popular by Thomas Heberlein, in the fact that if people have more information, then surely they will correct their behavior and change the way things go. But if I asked you right now to not drive your car to the grocery store from your home, and I gave a presentation about it, I really made a bunch of pamphlets, and I showed all the ecological disruption from that simple trip, would you do it for your entire life? Because it's so difficult. We've developed a society with patterns to promote convenience, and it's hard to get out of that unless we change society as a whole. So this is what environmental communicators run up against. And what we can search for is much greater purpose in these ideas, an action-driven community development. For me, this was at the University of Vermont with a student initiative to push the university to divest from fossil fuels, which I'm proud to say was successful. And with such a cognitive approach, it's very much beyond just a simple PowerPoint to the administrators which convinced them. It was weekly meetings and outreach to many different students and involvement across the UVM area with faculty and staff and city councilors in order to promote this long process and adjustment. And ideas are not just that. They have to be as part of this process with lots of community involvement. So this takes me to an analysis that I wanted to do with a key communicator platform. And what better analysis could we do than with TED Talks? So you all are familiar with this platform because of its global prevalence. It has allowed key experts to come together and present on an idea and really inspire masses to change this problem that they are so focused on. And this is it. They always create this feeling. You know how it goes? And this is largely through many critiques that have been analyzed of having a main point, having a professional that establishes credibility. They throw in a little humor and jokes sometimes, and they overall develop a narrative throughout in order for you to connect with them over time. Sort of like how I'm doing right now, if you think about it. So in this way, they will tell you something you ought to do in your personal life, a change you ought to make, or something that the organization is doing. And in terms of how TED has approached the environmental field, which is what I'm particularly curious about, we can do a little exploration. So here, if we were going to go to their watch page, it looks a little something like this. And we could search through the topics. And there's not one that clearly aligns with environmentalism. It could be technology, science, global issues, etc. We could alternatively go to this search place, and there is a word for environment, in which case we could view all these different talks in the environmental sphere from these key experts. And you can browse these at your will. And they really have profound ideas. However, TED has come under large scrutiny just because the degree to which they stay largely ideas by these key folks, and the ways in which these ideas can then become action for audience members, as opposed to just staying the presenter's idea and something that the presenter is doing with their respective organization. So in terms of these key topics, I wanted to see whether there was any gaps of what they were talking about. And I've sort of mapped it out across these 6 circles. So they might be focusing on justice, such as with Mary Robinson's talk about why climate change is a threat to human rights. They might talk about ecology with Suzanne Simard's How Trees Talk to Each Other, with the idea that if we have this greater ecological understanding, we can then understand trees more and mimic these natural systems in our human ones. Alternatively, we can talk about the impacts of climate change, the need to address this large issue, shifts such as with the talk of would you live in a floating city in the sky? These are crazy ideas, but could really connect with people of how the Earth needs to change. And in general, many of them also talk about the future. But that's not to say each of these talks are in one of these 6 circles. As you can see, they overlap a lot. And we can see this very profoundly with the talk about an urgent call to protect the world's third pole, with the need to protect the ecology of this area with its many glaciers, obviously the need to address the impacts and what this future could look like. So now, as I was saying, TED has fallen under massive critique about the ways in which these ideas can become realities. And it needs to become a platform that takes these issues head on. And TED has noticed this and has tried to respond to this critique with a few different ideas. First, it has its Audacious project, which uses grant dollars in order to respond to these talks and really get feet on the ground to solve them. However, this still isn't quite community-based. They also have TED Circles, which is their newest idea of having discussion groups online to further go beyond the talk and see what people think about it. However, this has not become super popular of late. In terms of TED's response to environmental work, they've also started an initiative called TED Countdown, which is behind it. And Countdown is just having its second conference in October, and it's a little misdirected, but in this way, it's still just focusing on this general talk at a conference narrative, in that people come and they can spend a large amount of money to come to that talk, and then nothing really continues afterwards. So what I would suggest for TED is the need to go beyond this, to really understand the difficulties of just the cognitive approach and really move to develop community-based networks and platforms and projects beyond the talks frame. So I would call this TED-E, E for environment, in the fact that we have the general premise that TED has designed and had massive success off of having talks where many people can come and listen to key experts, but then also mixing this with discussion groups, in the fact that then key community members can come together from their respective career areas and offer solutions for a local community problem or how that local community can respond to global issues. And it is in this way that many people would actually come together, would be able to feel like a responsible environmental citizen and to be able to right wrongs together no matter what life has brought to you. In this way, we would truly be able to address climate change and sustainability issues with solution-based voices and networking towards widespread action. Thank you.